Meanwhile, former president of the Nigeria Bar Association and counsel to the president of the Senate, senior advocate of Nigeria, Olisa Abakoba, has asked the suspended senator representing Kogi Central in the National Assembly, Senator Natasha to clarify certain contradictions in her sexual harassment claims against his client. Mr. Abakoba, who is leading the legal team for Senator AKPABIO, told journalists today in Lagos that the widespread publications of the harassment claims has damaged his client's reputation locally and internationally, but more evidence is needed to support the allegations.
We must remember that there are two sides. And so one allegation is on sexual harassment, the other one is denied. But the context in which this occurred was that Senator AKPABIO and Senator Natasha incidentally shared the same birthday. I don't know if you are aware. They shared the same birthday, 9th of December. And so on the 8th of December, they've all arrived in Uyo to begin the preparation for the birthday on the following day. So the petition written by Senator Natasha indicates that the sexual harassment occurred on the 8th. But I don't know if you've looked at some of the documentation I've given. So what then made me wonder and say maybe I needed to clarify. So we sent a letter, which you've got. We'd like to have some clarification on the important timeline contradiction. So on the 8th, there's an allegation of sexual harassment. On the 9th, there is praise for the same person who, on the 8th, a sexual harassment allegation is made. That's the purpose of this.
I'd like to know, why did you raise the issue of didn't you raise the issue of sexual harassment on the floor?
How do you mean? I should have just mentioned it on the floor?
I'm asking because, you know, the issue of your seat was the contention when that altercation happened. But when you went on television, you raised the issue of sexual harassment. So I'm just curious, though, why didn't you raise it on the floor?
Okay, Sharon, you know, I had told you I didn't want to go in details into the sexual harassment part because, you know, there's been a whole lot of conversation, but I will touch a bit of it. The issue of my seat, me refusing to move to the seat, was born because I perceived that as a result of the malice I have suffered from the Senate President, one of many that I've suffered over the past 1 year. And I knew that it was coming from a point of anger and hate from the Senate President. And he decided to move me from my seat in order to kill my visibility. He moved me to a far corner near where the chamber staff sat. And that place, the cameras hardly get there. So I knew that it was a tactic that he was deploying to kill my visibility in chambers. And I know that he did not follow the normal process because I ought to have been notified by the clerk of the National Assembly. Now, before where I sat, where I used to be my seat in these new chambers, we were all notified 4 days before then. And I do have the notification where it's like a little chat and every senator's name is written in their boxes. So you get to see your allocated seat. And then senators are given a chance to argue and say, you know what, I don't want to sit here, move me to this place. They could have one reason or the other, it could, you know, and they were given a chance to argue. I wasn't even given a chance. I wasn't even notified.
Thereabout that seats were changed.
Well,
so you were not the only one.
If there are 10 of us that our seats were changed, I was the one that was moved to the worst part, while others were moved to my own seat, which was they progressed while I regressed in position. Do you understand? So I believe that I was the main target, while others were just made to seem as if we were filling in seats. Now, the excuse he gave, or they were saying, was that because Senator Ned Nwoko and someone else, they camped. Senator Ned Nwoko sat right in the very front. If they are moving me to Senator Ned Nwoko's seat, that's fine. I mean, if they're saying they want to fill in the vacant seat, so move me right up front. I don't mind there. But why do you have, of everybody, why are you moving me there? And let me say this. You know, I did mention that there is nothing that happens or is being spoken of, even in whispers, that you don't get to know. I already heard 2 days before that the Senate president complained to some senators that each time he walks through, because I was sitting by the aisle, the first seat at the top aisle near the door, that each time he walks through and he passes that, my presence angers him. He has complained about that. He had even told some people that I gave him the bad eye each time he walked past, and sometimes I don't even stand to honor him.
Why don't you
and let me say this. Since I resumed as a senator, I always observed and respected the protocol according to the Senate rules, and I always stood to honor. You will have see lots of pictures I stood. The only 2 times I refused to stand were the 5th and the 6th of March, which was when I already moved to my new seat. These were the only 2 times, and that was out of protest. I said, you know what? We already had the heated conversation and the problem, and I did not stand to usher him in. I didn't join the procession in ushering him in on the 5th and the 6th after I have moved to that seat. But while I was sitting there, I always stood to observe the procession. So, but basically, what some people thought that, oh, she was just rude. She didn't want to, she broke the Senate rule. She should have just moved to the seat according to that. But I knew that that was an attack, a further attack of many others that I have faced in a continuous manner. And that was why I refused to move, because I knew it was born out of malice. I perceived the Senate president was hiding under the Senate rules to exercise his vendetta on me.
But you have a family relationship. Did you ever approach him to say you didn't like what was going on?
Earlier point, yes, I did. That was last year. That was at the earlier part of, you know, I said I didn't want to go specifically into that. But when the whole relationship started, when I started rejecting the advances, when I rejected the advances and I experienced the hostility, you know, I did mention a number of times to my husband, who would then speak to him. And there was a time, we were also in London last year, January 12th. We visited him, his wife was there, and my husband was like, oh, why is it that you're a bit unfriendly to her and that she's complained? And then he right there, he was like, oh, why are you always reporting me to your husband? Why don't you tell me directly? And then when we resumed chambers, and the next time I saw him, you know, maybe not allowing my emotions or something, and I was like, oh, dear SP, I've tried to present this a number of times. Why don't you allow me? He goes, Natasha, so you now see that no matter how many times you report to your husband, you have to meet with me. This is my space. Talk to me, blah, 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 make me happy and all of that. So I don't want to go into this. But the point is, I have a number of times met with people, even some senators.
Did you regret telling your husband about the sexual harassment when it started?
No, I didn't regret not telling him. The first thing is, a lot of women find it very difficult to speak about sexual harassment. Even women who are raped, many of them don't speak about it, and that's the worst part of it. Because there's a burden of shame that comes with speaking of sexual harassment, especially in this part of the world, whereby it's a taboo for women to speak about any violation of her body or interests, you understand? As a society, we have not developed to a point whereby certain conversations are allowed. And I think probably, it doesn't mean I don't trust my husband, but I think I was looking at preserving the friendship between himself and the Senate president. I didn't want to
family relationship is totally collapsed right now.
Well, I think as for me, I don't think I would want to maintain any friendship with a person who does not respect boundaries, and I don't think we would have.
They're claiming that there are no evidence, no shred of evidence that you can prove that AKPABIO harassed you sexually.
Is this the court?
No, not the court.
Exactly.
So
no, let's leave that part.
And I've come back to the fact that you're a lawyer.
Yes, let's leave that part. At the right time, I will prevent, at the right time and in the right space, I will present the evidence that I have. But let me say this. While I was illegally suspended, I was not given a chance for the matter to be investigated. And then the committee that was set up, which was headed by Senator Neda Emaswen, they did not invite me. The first time the invitation was sent out, which was on the 5th, that was the very day I submitted the petition. There was a court order that the committee should not sit for 72 hours, but explained to the court the reason why I should face that committee. They went ahead, had the session, had the meeting, came up with the suspension, and there were also complaints by some senators that their signatures were, it was the attendance sheet that was used to endorse the report and not the senators themselves, which also amounts to the report being fraudulently conducted, which also again means my suspension is void ab initio as well. So a whole lot of irregularities surround my suspension. And then again, when I asked why was I suspended, they said I was not suspended for the sexual harassment. I was petition. I was suspended for gross misconduct. And then you ask, what exactly was my gross misconduct? What did I do that amount? They say it's because I violated the Senate rules. But are they not in violation of the Senate rules? The Nigerian Constitution does not allow an elected officer to be suspended. But then the Senate says they are bound by their own Senate rules. The Senate rules says that a senator should be suspended for a maximum of just 14 days.